The number one question I always get is, how do I manage those pressurized moments in Q&As right after a presentation where people start throwing random questions, they're going into some fine detail, they are almost like they're trying to poke hole at what it is that I'm saying just for the sake of it. And I never know how to think fast and respond on the spot. How do I deal with that pressure and think fast even when I'm freaking out inside? Of course, there's a mental model for this. Since I learned it in management consulting, I think every single Q&A, I don't want to exaggerate, but I'm almost curious to hear what the questions are and how I can use it. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. The key lies in your relationship with risk at work and how you communicate that risk. We all know the corporate setting doesn't love risk, right? Humans in general, we don't like uncertainty. That's why our brain is wired to start making patterns out of things so that we feel more certain. And if you feel that anxiousness in Q&As, it also means that you probably adopt the idea of, since we don't want uncertainty, I'm going to go out there, do research, turn over every leaf to make sure we know as much as possible. So you end up thinking about every fringe case that might exist, and people probably say, hey, you're losing the big picture, you're too much in the weeds, why are you overthinking this? And the problem with focusing too much on the detail, overemphasizing the details that you found, is that then people zoom in on those details and they want to ask follow-up questions about things that, well, there is no more data about it. The conversation derails, you haven't prepared for it, so now you're so worried. Now, all of this research I've done seem like it's not even standing on something firm. And when you present to leaders, a lot of them like to reference the anecdotal insights. I talked to this one customer this one time, and they said something that they preferred tier pricing to usage-based pricing because of X. Do we look into that? And you feel like, what? That's anecdotal. One person said this one time, and I went through all this work to look at the actual data. Like, how can we just change gears so fast? And there's a reason why leaders love anecdotal insights, and we'll talk about that in just a second. The problem with this approach of managing risk is, number one, we can never have perfect information, because by the time we have perfect information, it's way too late. That business opportunity is gone, right? Everyone can now see it. It's been proven. And usually data, there's a lot of lagging indicators. So by the time you have the lagging indicators, it means something has already moved forward. And that's why leaders love anecdotal insights, is that, okay, we haven't quite seen it as a trend yet, but I'm starting to pick these things up. And with leaders, they have asymmetry in information. So even though to you it sounds like an anecdotal insight, to them, they've seen something else that made them connect the dots. So in this rigid way of managing risk, then it makes you unable to include that insight that the leaders care about into what it is that you're doing. And to them, it just feels frustrating. Like, why are you missing the bigger point? And that brings me to the second problem, which is when you're focused on being right, then there is no room for any other options. Everything that slightly disagrees with you is an attack on your idea. So you feel the need to defend it, even though some of them might be legit and you actually want to consider them. Not only does this put a lot of pressure on you, right? Because there is no perfect information. So of course you cannot answer every single question right. And it hurts the final outcome, because if there are legitimate thoughts that go against what it is that you're finding right now, there's no elegant way of accepting it. You either have to say, oh, well, yeah, I've completely missed that, my fault, and now I have to start again. Or is, no, we're not going to include that, even though it might be helpful. The shift here is to recognize that decisions made under uncertainty is where opportunities lie. And by removing yourself completely from uncertainty means removing yourself away from the opportunities that exist. So the alternative, the mental model that we'll talk about today, is hypothesis-driven thinking. A quick refresh, hypothesis, if you don't remember high school science, is simply a proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. And this means instead of avoiding risk and uncertainty, we're going to manage it and use it by setting the expectation up front. Right? This based on what we know, and it could be anecdotal insights, it could be quantitative, qualitative data, usually as a combination of all of those. This is our hypothesis. We think there's an opportunity in X. And based on our more certain understanding of our capabilities, of our competitive advantage, we think we could capture this opportunity by doing Y. And we think the size of this opportunity might be based around the size because of all the research that we're doing. Imagine you just said that and you went into a Q&A. You wouldn't be worried about, oh my gosh, is people going to poke holes at this? You'll rather welcome other people to help you shape the hypothesis, right? What you're saying is, based on what we know so far, this is the direction we think we'll go. Everyone, what do you think? Like, have you seen similar things? Have you seen different things? You'll be inviting those anecdotal insights, and there is a lot more room to explore and collaborate between different departments. Now it's not, oh, now the product team is going to come in and say everything is wrong. Rather, it's, oh, they've seen something different, interesting. So how should we rephrase the hypothesis? Maybe it's like this instead, and we should make a small tweak. And it gives a different story to the data that we're seeing. This will give you the opportunity to lead. Right? Maybe it's you who came up with the hypothesis. Maybe it's your team. Maybe it came from a leader with that anecdotal insight that said, hey, we should look into changing our pricing structure. Wherever it is, you can drive the project forward. Doesn't matter if the data you find is supporting that or the data you find is opposing that. All you have to do is just gather the hints and mold it as you go. Q&A then becomes just a discussion, right? Oh, you heard something different. Oh, tell me more about that, right? Now you're interested in what it is that they have to say, even if it contradicts the current situation, because you are in gathering mode, you're in experimental mode, and all of a sudden, all that expectation of being right dissipates. Because you want to find out more rather than saying, I don't want any of your input. The other added benefit is once you start to, let's say, put pilots to the project ideas based on what you're finding so far, if the pilot works out and supports your hypothesis, well, fantastic. And if it doesn't and it fails, fantastic, right? Because you're learning and gathering more information to understand what actually is the problem, right? What part of the hypothesis needs tweaking. How powerful is that? That whether you're right, whether you're wrong, it doesn't matter. What matters is getting to an answer and understanding the problem that exists. It always comes back to the hypothesis that has room to change. Now give hypothesis-driven thinking a try and check out these tips for articulating the hypothesis and what you're finding with these 5 tips. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.